I definitely have multiple tabs of Rate Your Music open at all times.
Yeah, I have
mainly because I forget to close them.
Well, I need them to be able to access the specific charts that I'm looking at.
All right, let's get started.
Meow. Come here. Yeah, they yell at me now that I'm about to start recording. Yep. Paging Dr. Beulah. Dr. Beulah. Emergency.
You know what really makes us mad? Is wasting money on CDs with only one or two good songs.
Yeah. Tell them about punk.
What's up, posers? Welcome to Punk Lotto Pod. I'm your co-host, Justin Hensley.
I'm your other co-host, Dylan Hensley.
And this is the show where we choose 1 year at random and select one punk, hardcore, emo, or punk-adjacent album from that year to discuss. Dylan is back with us now after a week away. We appreciate friend of the show, Dave Brown, for filling in as co-host last week. And if you want to hear what Dylan was up to over the last week, you can head on over to patreon.com/punklautopod. On the most recent episode, we did a news of the world. And in it, Dylan talked about his ventures on his road trip to see Old Faithful.
Old Faithful.
His 3-star mid-review of Old Faithful.
I mean, it's all right, I guess. It was a fun conversation about the news, many kinds of news.
Yeah, lots of different stories. It was actually pretty busy month for stories, so covered a lot of different topics there. Normally the summer is pretty dead when it comes to those kind of stories, and there were quite a few. Definitely worth talking about. But you can get that for $1, and if you want to devote an entire episode to an album that you want us to talk about, you could join at the $10 tier, do a one-time $10 donation. You choose the album we talk about, and we do a whole episode on it. And we got a couple of those. We have some planned for the future. I need to talk to them whenever they want to get them done. But yeah, we got a few out there. So the slots are open again. They were closed for a minute. We have 2 slots we always keep open. So if you want to get in there, hop on in. But also, if for some reason both slots are full and you still want one, I'll go ahead and open up another one for you. It doesn't take much to add an extra seat to the tier. But honestly, I could just have it unlimited. I don't think it would matter. I don't think we would be too swamped with selections. But patreon.com/punklautopod. So this week, it was your turn to be assigned the year. So looking through, we hadn't done the 80s in a minute. And I saw that it's been over a year since we covered the year 1981. We covered it last June on episode 233. We did Mission of Burma's Signals, Calls, and Marches. Prior to that, we did episode 168. We covered Wild Gift by the band X. We did that one with Ian from Kowloon Walled City. Then back at episode 74, we did Echo and the Bunnymen's Heaven Up Here and Government Issues Legless Bull EP. This is back at the album and EP days, where we had Taylor of Diversified DIY on. And way back in episode 49, we did The Stranglers, The Gospel According to the Men in Black, and 7 Seconds, Socially Fucked Up, with Josh from Late Bloomer. So we fit 81 a couple times there. Though out of the 80s, it's probably one of the ones we've, except for maybe 88 or 89, it's one of the ones we've maybe hit not as many times. So as usual, what were some albums from 1981 that you were considering for us to talk about?
Not too many. I know I sent you a few. Let me find them again. Oh yeah, there they are. I considered Living in Darkness by Agent Orange. Are there more than one Agent Orange records?
There are a couple Agent Orange records.
Okay. That's the first one. Yeah.
That's the one though. That is the big Agent Orange record.
And I was like, that's an early band, a kind of unique band, a band doing something that would fit more within a conventional definition of punk rock at the time, which was kind of unusual for where they were from, for being in the early 80s. They're not a full on, I don't know that you would really call them a hardcore band. There's an element of hardcore there, but I feel like they're also in that category of there's the surf punk thing too, and they feel like they fit within the same category as the Descendants in terms of being really kind of being a predecessor to the 90s skate punk sound, which is really, it's pop punk and skate punk. And Agent Orange to me seems like an understated but really influential band that I don't really know very much about. I don't think I've ever actually listened to that record.
I have. It's actually a really good record. I mean, if you like the song Bloodstains, like you'll like the whole record because it's very much in that like surfy punk thing throughout the whole album.
Yeah.
I mean, even if you like early Offspring, like they very clearly lifted from Bloodstains for the song Keep 'Em Separated.
Yeah. So that was a pretty strong contender. I guess the reason we'll get into the reason why I picked what I picked, but I also considered Prince Charming by Adam and the Ants, that's a pretty important Adam and the Ants record. We've never done an Adam.
No, we have not. I think we talked about them in like Patreon content, and then maybe they were on the 100 to 100, but the 100 to 100 is in our top 10 currently of most listened to episodes. So it's a gimmick episode. Wound up being pretty popular. But we covered lots of artists, so that tends to usually be the thing.
So that's one that I know that would have been probably pretty easy to talk about. And it feels like a significant artist, and it's maybe an interesting artist to talk about through the lens of punk and what is punk at this time period, because it's kind of honestly a stretch to call Adam a punk band. I mean, it's new wave, new romantic, that's all branches off of punk, but at that point, that's kind of a sound that is really popular and pretty far removed from, there were bands that were starting right before, or at this time that were just like responding to new wave as a genre that had already existed for a few years up to this point. So it feels like it's a sound that kind of comes from punk, but it's far enough away from punk to really be classified as its own thing.
I also feel like today we don't realize exactly how big and how important Adam and the Ants were for punk music at the time. Like, I think they're one of those bands that like massively influential, very important in the moment. But then like as soon as like we got out of that like early 80s period, it just like disappeared. It evaporated and like their importance, because like for a lot of people, this is what punk music was. Like to them, the definition of punk was Adam and the Ants. Like that was the early punk bands. They were like some of the most like mainstream punk adjacent artists out there. And then they were massive in the UK, but they're really big here in the States too. And so big that like, Darby Crash was like obsessed with Adam and the Ants whenever he went to the UK, like after the Germs initially broke up.
Yeah, he was trying to do an Adam and the Ants with the Darby Crash band. And I think that, I guess part of it culturally, like the new romantic aspect of it, people really just go to like Duran Duran and Culture Club and that kind of stuff, ABC, Soft Cell, the much more new romantic, new wave stuff that you hear on an 80s radio station now, which I feel like you don't hear Adam songs very often on the radio.
Like I said, it feels like I know like all of these artists from this time period, like the 80s was their peak in their popularity, but at the same time, like that didn't carry past the 80s. It feels like they were kind of like forgotten about going forward. And I don't know is it because it was so bombastic, so like really over the top, and I don't know. They're such a weird band that it's like they had horns in a lot of songs, so I could see that being like a turnoff for a lot of people, but
I don't know. There's horns all over the 80s.
Yeah, there's something about their sound, though, that is very much their sound that I've never really heard replicated. It's a very percussive sound. Like, the way the drums are on all their records, too. Like, those humongous drums on all their albums. It's just a very, like, punchy band.
Well, there's less for where they sat, the scene that they were in, and, like, the kind of bands that they were probably most similar to in terms of like songwriting. They weren't as like synthesizer focused.
Yeah, right.
They definitely used much more organic and sounds and much more traditional rock instrumentation. Yeah, I mean, definitely heavy emphasis on like those drums, the auxiliary percussion, and I don't know. I don't know why they fell out of. I think they fell out of playlisting. I think they fell out of radio playlisting and just kind of fell out of. They also ended early in the 80s too. Like they didn't keep going. So it's now they're just a Family Guy joke, I guess. I don't know. Culturally, that's the relevance. I don't know. We heard them all the time because our dad liked them. So
yeah, same with
feels
both our parents. Our mom liked
Yeah.
them too. And like when they pop up and stuff, I'm always like, wow, somebody's using, like, you know, when it pops up in like Hot Fuzz, so like the beginning of the movie, it's just like, whoa, like that. It just, I don't know, maybe it just was of its time and that was kind of like it. But I also think a lot of it holds up really well. So I don't know. Surprising. Yeah, with the Prince Charming was the last LP by them, and then Adam Ant went solo and did Friend or Foe in '82. But then like everything he did after that, it's like meh.
Yeah. Yeah. There's also just where he goes musically as a solo artist probably doesn't help.
Yeah.
I also considered Solid Gold by Gang of Four because we have not done a Gang of Four record.
We have not.
And I guess what maybe I decided not, I don't know, I didn't go with that one probably because it's not entertainment, but I don't know, it is still really good. And Songs of the Free is still really good. So I was like, I don't know, should we do the one if we're going to do Gang of Four?
Yeah. Yeah. That's kind of my thinking of most of these picks. Agent Orange, that would be the one to do. Like that is the record to do. They only had one other 80s album and then like they did another one in the 90s. So that would be the one to do there. So I genuinely think we'll probably get to that Agent Orange record, either the next or the time after we do 81 again. With Adam Ant, I would probably rather do the album before Prince Charming or even his first solo record, because I think both of those are better than Prince Charming. And then with Gang of Four, I was like, Entertainment's kind of like the one, right? It's like the blueprint record for post-punk going forward. It's one of the blueprint records for post-punk going forward. But I don't know what the rest of their discography is kind of. They'd honestly be a prime challengeography band, because I know nothing about their discography, really, beyond like the first two records.
It's not very long.
Yeah.
Well, I forgot how much they did when they came back.
Is it like a New Order thing where they have like way more albums past their prime?
Well, it's like 4 records, in pretty quick succession, 79, 81, 82, 83. And then they have like a 91 record, a 95 record, a 2005 record, 2011, 2015, 2019. They have more post-initial breakup records than original run records.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think that any of them are considered good. So that might be a very painful challengeography. People think Hard is terrible. The last original run Gang of Four record, it's fine. It's not. I think it's fine. It's not great. It's definitely not Entertainment or Solid Gold or even Songs of the Free, but it's not unlistenable. It's just, it's the last one and it has the reputation of being inferior. And also, like, I think people call it more of a sellout record. I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know enough about their discography to really say. I guess if we're looking at the overall, what else came out in 1981? Definitely. All right, we got to tell people what rateyourmusic.com punk albums sorted by popularity from 1981 is. Deceit by This Heat. Why?
They recorded it in a meat locker. I'm sure they did.
Who is it? Anybody?
It's This Heat.
Experimental.
Yeah, they're just an experimental UK post.
The secondary
band.
genres drive me crazy. Avant prog, tape music, industrial, krautrock, and sound collage.
Yeah.
All things I don't like.
Yeah, I've heard stuff from this that I like. I haven't listened to the album. I'm sure there's stuff on there that I don't like.
We do have Faith by The Cure, which is I believe their third LP. So early Cure, pre-pop Cure. I definitely have heard this record before, but I didn't love it.
No, I've heard it before too. It's so much early Cure stuff is just like, I recognize that this is good. This is good. I don't really want to listen to it.
Yeah.
It's not for me, but it's the kind of stuff where I'm like, I totally get how some people are into this, and I don't want to begrudge them that. Like, go for it. I wish I liked it more, is really kind of the feeling.
We have Damaged by Black Flag, major record. Probably should be the actual number one on here, but whatever. Yes.
Something else you'll hate, Glenn Branca, The Ascension.
Yeah, Glenn Branca. What's Glenn Branca's thing? What's his dealie?
No Wave.
No Wave. That's right. Yeah, No Wave.
Always totalism. He likes rhythmic structures.
Uh-huh.
Oh, okay. Does it just go doodle-doo, 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 doodle-doo for 10 minutes?
Excellent record. Juju by Susie and the Banshees. Probably the best Susie and the Banshees record. My favorite for sure. Incredible record. I love this album so much.
I listened to Youth of America by Wipers recently. I don't know what prompted me to, but I listened to it and I was like, I think I thought I liked this less the first time I heard it. I probably used to think that the song Youth of America is like 10 minutes long. I was like, oh, this is unnecessarily long. Listening to it again, I'm like, I'm totally into this. Like, I shouldn't like it so much because it is just repetitive for 10 minutes. There's so many crazy guitar noises and it comes back when it swings back around into that chorus. It's like, fuck yeah. I mean, and the rest of the record, NSB pushing the extreme, this killer stuff on it.
I didn't realize that this was considered their best record.
It is not. Now that's the thing. I still don't agree with that assessment. A lot of people think it's their best record.
We have the album that taught New Order how to record records on their own, Movement by New Order. This was their first post Joy Division album, and yeah, the only record they used a producer who then they were just like, and how do you do that? Okay, let me write that down real quick. And right. Well, thank you so much for your help. We'll never use you again. And
yeah, we will just tell the engineers what you said to these engineers. Just going to repeat, and then we're going to sit there and irritate them, telling them, no, I want it to be more squibbly. No, I think it should be more wombly.
Wibbly wobbly. 81 is a pretty solid year. We got the Gun Club's Fire of Love, sort of psychobilly band.
Yeah, punk blues, death rock even. I don't know. I don't know that people actually properly classify them as death rock, but they were definitely part of that scene.
We got Bauhaus's Mask. We've got the Police, Ghost in the Machine. I think my least favorite Police record. You know what? I haven't listened to them all, though. I can't 100% for sure say. But I listened to it this week. I guess I should say this for when I'm listening later. But I did listen to it this week, and I was like, the others are better. Looking at the ratings on Radio Music, the users agree. So
yeah, it's probably the least fun Police record.
It was not very fun. Like, I was like, yeah, every little thing she does is magic is fun. Is there another single on this? I feel like there's another single on this record, but I'm blanking on which one it is. But yeah, I listened to it and I was like, definitely have more fun with the rest of their discography.
Probably just Spirits in the Material World.
Yeah, that's one I think it's like, it's a song that you know, but you don't know the name. Wow, man, we got October by U2, which was their, what is this? Is this their second LP? Because it did Boy before this in 80. Yeah, so it's the second LP, which features, I don't know. I don't think this one has a big hit on it.
No, I don't think it does. I don't think anything for War has a hit.
Yeah. So I guess one of the records that when I was kind of just casually scrolling through it just to see what else came out that year, and I was like, if it was me choosing this week's episode, I probably would have gone with the Adolescents self-titled album, because
be a good one.
I know nothing about the Adolescents other than they're important and that album covers everywhere. Like, I've heard Adolescents songs. I know that Steve Soto's in the band and a lot of members over time, but this is like the one, right? Like, this is their big record. They didn't do a follow-up until 87, it looks like. So they have more albums than you'd think. They have 12 albums, but they waited 6 years before they made their second album. So and then they did a third one in 88, and then they don't do anything until 05, OC Confidential. So yeah, they're a big question mark band. They're one of those bands where it's like you just saw the album cover more than you ever heard them or heard anyone talk about them. You just like, that's an important band, but like, are they really that important? Was it just because they were there?
Well, they would have been more important if they had not taken 6 years, I think.
Yeah.
I mean, I could have easily picked where to go. Men at Work's Business as Usual. I was like, that's probably too far.
I don't know. I think it would have been fun to listen to and talk about.
Well, I know it's fun to listen to because the record kicks ass. It fucking rules. That's why I would have picked it, because it's awesome. Love that record.
Is the Duran Duran record too far outside the scope of punk as well?
Yeah, it's the first one.
Yeah. Girls on Film, first track.
It's probably the one that's most justifiable to do.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't think you could do it with Rio.
Rio might be like, this is a pop record. What are you doing? Rio's great too.
Yeah. Seven and the Ragged Tiger. Yeah. Funny band. Just a funny band. Because they were just like kind of like the pretty boy band. Like that's kind of how they were thought of at the time. Yeah. I mean, Talk by the Psychedelic Furs. Definitely up on the list of options as well. Oh, Beauty and the Beat by the Go-Go's.
Oh, yeah.
That would have been actually great.
I listened to that last week. I saved it to my phone. And I did listen to it in the car. I'm like, that's a fun record. Yeah.
All three of their records were fun. I don't know if that fourth one that came out in the 2000s was any good, but I mean, we can rapid fire some more. We have The Punchline by the Minutemen.
What's this for? Like Killing Joke.
We got Joseph K's The Only Fun in Town. New Traditionalists by Devo.
Yeah.
Yeah, that would have been a really fun one. Jerking back and forth. Oh yeah.
I Love Rock and Roll by Joan Jett, but I figured that's double dipping.
Yeah. I have already covered it, so it's one that if we were to do a Joan Jett record again, I'd want a guest for that, just to have like, another voice. I'm not against covering the same artist multiple times, or even covering an album that I've covered in something else on its own. But sneak peek, I think the next episode of Joan Jett's Challengeography has the best record, at least the best record I've heard so far. So I'll leave that little teaser out there.
Is it an 80s record?
It is.
Okay.
I haven't got to the 90s yet. But I was reading an article that was saying, it was maybe a review, where it's like somebody talking about her because they were like a radio DJ and they like interviewed her in like the 90s. And then one of the things that person said in the article was that there's not a bad Joan Jett record. Now, I don't know if that just comes from a mega fan,
Yeah.
Or if it's true. At this stage, I've heard 6 of them and none of them are bad. So
is it Glorious Results?
We haven't. I don't want to give it away.
All right. I'm just looking at her discography. I'm like, which one would it be? Yeah.
I will say though that this episode, whenever it gets done, I got lots of notes. It's also very hard to find good information about these records. You have to like try and find as many like interviews from the time period to really get a feel for what's going on, and those are really hard to actually come across. So I did find like a Joan Jett fan club website that has like tons of interviews in it, so I'm hoping that will be a good resource I go to read going forward. But I will say though, this next episode, what I expected to happen and what I wanted to happen with her discography does start to happen. So I hope that trend continues going forward. But we get into some weird stuff. We get in weird stuff earlier than I thought we would, is really what I'm thinking. But we should get into the actual album.
We could have done Party by Iggy Pop.
We could have. This is like the post Bowie stuff, right?
Yeah, that's the end of the line, I think, for most people. I think Soldier has its, apologists, but nobody likes Party. And then it's from Party onward where it's like every other record is good.
Yeah.
And like the off ones are terrible.
He's weird because he's like, it's really just who he works with, right? Like that's the key to an Iggy Pop record. It's like, who else is on the album with him, Because does he write any music? Outside of the lyrics?
He does, because he wrote a lot of the music for the Stooges. I don't know if he just he's like, I can just play chords. I think maybe he plays the piano, probably plays the guitar a little bit. I'm trying to remember what I read about how he wrote the Stooges stuff that he wrote. I think he probably played the guitar some.
Yeah.
And then they're just like, we'll figure out a riff to play.
Yeah. Well, he comes up with the melodies, I guess. Yeah, I've just never seen the man hold an instrument. Yeah. So I don't know what he does to write. But yeah. Well, let's get into it. So I gave you the year 1981, and you selected Pleasant Dreams by the Ramones. The Ramones formed in 1974 in Forest Hills, Queens, New York. What are you laughing at?
The way you said Ramones, I was like, Romaines?
I did say it weird when I first said it.
The Ramones.
Hey, it's the Ramones.
I love the U.S. punk band, the Ramones.
Released July 20th, 1981. So we were recording this 2 days to the what? What anniversary would that be? Can we do math?
Yeah, slowly.
The 43rd birthday of this record.
Yeah, that's not a one. That's not.
Yeah. But it is.
It's anything special for their 43rd birthday.
You
don't
might
even get to. You don't even get out of work. You got to go to work on your birthday.
Yeah. I do have some coworkers who are like, "Yeah, I took off for my birthday next week." It's like, you took a whole week off for your birthday? That's weird. You're over 30. It may just be like, I want to take a week off. Might as well do it around my birthday. It's in the summer. I could do some fun stuff, but
yeah. If it makes sense to take your vacation, then
yeah. But yes, released on Sire Records. This is the band's 6th full-length album, and the personnel on this album is Joey Ramone on vocals, Johnny Ramone on guitar, Dee Ramone on bass, and Marky Ramone on drums. And the album was produced by Graham Gouldman of the band 10cc. And there are some additional musicians on here as well. We have Vic Emerson providing synths and keys. He is also from the band 10cc. We have David Hassel, who's a percussionist and performed on some John Cooper Clarke albums. He is the British punk poet who shows up on all the British panel shows now. And it's some of the worst fucking like poetry I've ever heard. It's like, Little Miss Muffet sat on a tuffet and the cat struck back. It's very like A-B rhyme, simple baby poetry, and it's just like, you're famous for this? But he was hanging out with the punks, so that's how he did it. Graham Gouldman also plays some guitar on the record as well. And there's like a whole story about the recording and everything going into this. This actually is maybe the most information about an album recording that we have out there, along with like maybe The End of a Century being the other one. But
sorry, we got to go back to this because I just read this quote from a 2024 interview with John Cooper Clarke. I write all my poems with a quill by candlelight. If you see a picture of him, of course you do.
Yeah, he looks like Rick Ocasek.
But more insane.
Yeah. He's on the British shows all the time, and I see he comes on and he writes poems for the show. Like they'll have him on 8 out of 10 Cats Does Countdown, and he does like his little poems between rounds, and it's just terrible, so bad. Like, I don't get why people love this guy so much.
Maybe he's not giving them the good material.
I mean, he's making it up on the spot for the show, so no. So maybe, I'm missing the good stuff. Yeah. But he just delivers it in just, like, beret, finger snapping, like, West Village type.
He's a big Kerouac, Salinger, fan.
Yeah, beat poet thing.
Yeah, but, like, the beat poets, didn't they, like, eschew rhyme schemes all together? They're just, like, prose in a iambic pentameter.
Yeah.
Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe we should actually read some beat poetry. Heard Howl. I saw that movie.
the
James
Franco movie?
Franco. I've heard the Kerouac quotes in the Jawbreaker songs.
In Step Brothers, when he said they went Kerouac on all their asses, it was pretty funny.
I saw that Jack Kerouac movie too. Was it On the Road?
Like fairly recently, right?
Who's in that fucking movie? Kristen Stewart.
Oh, right. It was like she was like the star of the movie. It's like, you're not Jack Kerouac. Why are you the star of this movie?
She's like the woman that rides in the car with them.
Yeah.
Viggo Morgenstein is in that movie. Kirsten Dunst is in it too. I forgot she was in that.
Viggo Morgenstein?
That's the Always Sunny Halloween episode where he's dressed as Aragorn and he's calling the character Viggo Morgenstein.
I completely forgot about that one. All right, so as usual, we have previously covered the Ramones. We did way back in episode 4 which is, I think, still one of our most listened to episodes.
Jeez.
I can't imagine how terrible that is. But
I was just thinking about this earlier when we started recording the Patreon. We had a couple of false starts recording it, and the shift in tone between you and me talking to each other to you announcing the show, but then like messing up and like basically saying like, oh, we need to start over. We need to take that again. Your tone didn't shift from the introduction line to you saying we need to start over the way that it did from you speaking to me before. So it's like I realized that it's the difference between the way we used to record the show, I think, and the way we've gotten to recording the show is that when we're speaking on the mic and we know we're being recorded, we're not talking to each other. We're talking to the audience, even though we are talking to it's like we're both talking to the audience, but listening to each other and responding to what each other are saying. But our focus and our direction, our energy level is all focused towards the audience. I'm like, we just did that. Like, we didn't realize, we just naturally started doing that. Like, we realized the difference in, because I've maybe it's having guests is where it happened, where it like adding that third person to the conversation. And then once you take the guests away, we're so used to doing the show with a third person that there's like an imaginary third person is there that we're both talking to. I don't know. It's just something I noticed is that when we're talking on a recording, it doesn't feel as much like we're talking to each other.
Are you saying like the old episodes are the one we didn't do it that way?
Yeah, I feel like when we started, we were just like talking to each other. So we were talking like a normal conversation to each other, low energy. Yeah, and I didn't really like that one. Like, because it's unnatural for us to speak to each other as if we're radio hosts.
I wonder if that would, like, say if we'd always had a third, or like one of us had started it with another person, if that dynamic would have changed. Like if it would have like gotten there quicker, but
Yeah.
because it's you and me and the way we just talk to each other, and that's how maybe that's, I mean, I feel like that's podcasting 101 is to realize you're talking to an audience.
Yeah.
At least you're supposed to.
Yeah.
So like,
That's the thing that I don't think I mean, I definitely didn't know that. I feel like we together, I probably brought your energy level down. Being unprepared to.
well, I mean, it very much
Yeah,
was a
host.
show where it was just like, we're doing this. And you're like, I guess. Okay.
All right.
You were down to do it, but it wasn't your idea. So I was kind of throwing you, I was revealing secrets of the pod a little bit on the last episode because you don't listen.
Oh, he's not here. I can talk shit.
But I did. I mean, I'm saying it to your face now, but I told Dave, I was like, Dylan doesn't take notes for the show. He, as far as I know,
Until I do.
I mean,
Sometimes I do.
Sometimes, but like what, single digits times, right? Like,
Yeah, probably.
you don't research usually either before the show. You occasionally will too. It's another. Sometimes you do. And the other was like, I think you only listen to the records once most of the time.
Yeah, usually. I do it very close to recording the show, and I do tend to skim them in preparation to just be like, oh, which songs were this moment, and this moment, and this moment. Even sometimes while we're on the show, I'll like mute and be like, I know there's a part in a song. I need to figure out which song it is. But yeah,
it was.
I would help if I would listen to the records twice and actually just make notes. But yeah,
I wonder what the show, what it would sound like if, because Dave kind of like took over and was kind of like also hosting. Like, now here's some stats on the record. Like he just like took over and started saying stuff like that and like asking me questions about like, it was very funny.
but when
like-
Dave, to be fair, when Dave does Patreon sponsored episodes for us, he usually sends us a mini podcast
That's true.
to play in the show. So I think that's just his personality. Now, when I've gone on Josh's podcast,
I was gonna
that's
say,
the
what
only
other ones have you
pod-
done?
That's the only other podcast I've done. But the 2 times I've been on Josh's podcast, I have made notes. So I just know you're going to take notes. So we don't
Well,
need
I gotta
that
do.
much content.
Some episodes we do where I'm just
I'm
like,
here for the vibes.
pure vibes.
I'm the long legs of movie reviews.
Yeah. Okay, so like I said, we did this band way back then. We did the Joey Ramone Christmas EP for one of our Christmas episodes. I covered Animal Boy on Dance of Days. So we've talked about the Ramones a couple times.
I talked about Subterranean Jungle on 100 in 100, and I'm sure we've hit some of their records on maybe like Starting Fives, and certainly on Char Dads we've talked about.
Yeah, definitely.
We've talked around the Ramones so much on the show that a lot of times it feels like we don't need to ever pick any of the other Ramones records.
Yeah. So, I mean, that was going to be my question. What made you choose this album instead of any of those other ones that you were considering?
Well, there was a little bit of convenience. You asked me while I was traveling. So when you gave me the year and I was looking at it, I was like, oh, I already have Pleasant Dreams saved to my phone to listen to you on this trip. So I was like, well, that's pretty easy. And I did have that the Go-Go's record as well. So that could have been one I considered. But I figured the Ramones one would make sense because I like it a lot. And I thought it would be interesting. And this was kind of your observation too, was it would be interesting to do a later period Ramones record or a middle period Ramones record, because we did the first one, right?
Yeah, it was a subtitle.
So we've done the first record and everybody knows the first four, and it's always the first four. It's like the Black Sabbath. You can only trust the first four Black Sabbath records. Coincidentally, I listened to Sabbath Volume 4. Maybe I should save this I'll just do it here because I listened to plenty of other stuff for I'm Listening. I listened to Sabbath 4 on my trip as well. Kind of not great. Kind of overrated. It's backloaded.
Backloaded? That's a weird move.
Yeah. First side, it's just, there's no hits. It's okay. Like the first couple of songs are okay, but they're just not super memorable. And then Changes fucking sucks. And then, Supernaut ends the A side, which is, so that kind of saves the A side, but it's like Supernaut Snowblind is, you don't, until you get to the middle of the record, you don't get any of the like big stuff, Cornucopia, St. Vitus Dance, It's all the B side mostly. It's weird. I don't know. It's not a great listening experience compared to the 3 before it.
It's the Danzig 4 of Black Sabbath records.
Yeah, probably. Danzig 4 is mostly just brought down because of what? It's slower and
it's long. It's like a 50-minute album.
And it has Sadistical.
Yeah.
Which
very bad song.
Stinks. But yeah, it's everybody knows the first 4 will certainly probably hit, because the 70s are getting narrower and narrower to choose from. So there's a high chance we're going to hit the other 3 70s Ramones records at some point on the show. I don't think there's any reason to avoid doing them.
Yeah, we don't hit the 70s that often. One, because like we've gone over so many of them and there's not a ton of records in that time period. And 2, it's only like 77 to 79. So it's a much smaller window.
But nobody really seems to have much reverence for the 80s Ramones records. And there's reasons for it, I guess. There's membership changes, there's production flaws, there's certainly like a drop in of songwriting quality to an extent. It is still wild to me how much Joey and Johnny hated each other and are the only consistent members of the Ramones from beginning to end.
Yeah.
It's the two of them locked in a blood feud. I guess just the two of them so committed to that image and that name and that brand. They're just like, this is my career and I can work with an asshole.
Yeah.
It's just work.
Yeah.
Yeah. And everybody else is just like, I'm too fucked up to deal with you two.
So this was a choice of convenience coupled with
it's an interesting take on the Ramones. You know, it's a different period of the Ramones' career, and I think it's one that doesn't get a lot of light shed on it and doesn't get a lot of respect, despite there being plenty of hits from their 80s catalog.
Hits in lowercase terms, lowercase hits, because for a band that was around as long as they were not commercially successful at all. So, which plays into a really big factor to this record. But yeah. I mean, I think the 80s stuff is criminally underrated when it comes to the Ramones discography. Like, people are so obsessed with those first 4 records, and it's like almost all the 80s are good. Like, not every song is great, but like as an album, they're almost all good. I don't think there's like, you can only say like 1 or 2 are like actively bad records, I think. Because I did Animal Boy, like I said before, and I was like, I love that album. That album's so much fun, and it's considered not a great album, you know? So, yeah.
I think the only one I haven't heard from the 80s is Halfway to Sanity, which probably is the lowest rated.
I have, and I remember liking it. So
there's that. I mean, Subterranean Jungle is like one of the lower 3s.
Yeah.
And I love that record. It's like one of my favorite Ramones records. Probably is my favorite outside of the first 4.
Yeah. Well, let's get into a little bit of the backstory. There's a lot to this record. So we'll get into a little bit of some of the story. So to set the backstage, the group originally consisted of Joey, Johnny, Dee Dee, and Tommy. They were all high school friends. They met in high school. They played together in different bands growing up. And then later, whenever they started the band, Dee Dee was going to be the original singer, but realized he couldn't play guitar and sing at the same time. So they had Joey take over singing, but at the time, Joey was the drummer. And then Joey figured out, I can't drum and sing at the same time. Joey Ramone, no Mikey Erg, I guess is what we're trying to say there. But very funny that the Ergs, the Ramones core band, the drummer was the singer, and that was initially what the Ramones were doing too.
I can definitely understand there could be like Joey's OCD probably would have made that prohibitive as well.
Yeah. So that's
if he could focus on the one aspect of his performance, he could keep that probably closer to perfect, you know.
Yeah. And so that's where they brought in Tommy to play drums. So they debut in 1974 at CBGB's. Their first show is at CBGB's. Very funny. But CBGB's also then was a country bar more than anything, blues bar. And the punk scene was just starting to develop out of that club. They played 74 times their first year in CBGB's with an average set time of 17 minutes. Very short sets. They got spotted and then signed to Sire Records. They released their self-titled album in 1976. Leave Home and Rocket to Russia both released in 1977. And then Tommy gets tired of touring. He's like, I don't want to tour anymore. So he leaves the band as far as performing with them, but stayed on as their producer. Funnily, I was reading about Tommy. He was originally the band's manager, and they were auditioning drummers, but Tommy knew the songs on drums, and so Tommy was showing the people auditioning how to play the songs. And then they were like, Tommy, why don't you just be the drummer? It's like,
yeah.
Oh, I didn't think about that. So then he took over. But clearly, you know, he did not want to do this as his job, so he leaves by 78. So he's only in the band for 4 years as like an actual active member.
Yeah.
But
first 3 records.
Yeah. He stays on as a producer though. So they bring in Mark Bell, who had previously played in the band Dust, which metal people love to say that's the first metal band. The same people who are like, Death is the first punk band. It's like, Death didn't even predate the Ramones. What are you doing? But he also played Did they?
Yeah.
They didn't predate the Stooges, right? That's what it was.
The proto-punk band. Yeah, because they were like 71. It's like Stooges were 69.
Yeah.
Like, if there's a first punk band, it's the Stooges.
Or it's
if there's a first punk band, it's MC5. I mean, honestly, because the Stooges were just doing MC5.
Yeah. But Mark was also in Wayne County as well as Richard Hill and the Voidoids. So Mark goes back with it. He knows them. He's been around the brothers a lot during that time period. So they put out the record Road to Ruin in 1978 with Marky. Then they did Rock and Roll High School in 79 and then End of a Century in 1980. And End of a Century might be one of the most pivotal records in the band's discography as far as their sound goes. This is the record they did with Phil Spector, introducing the wall of sound thing, and the production's just very odd for this record.
Well, because it's
not
Phil
a great
Spector.
fit. Yeah.
It's Phil Spector, and he's insane. I mean, it was mental torment to work with him. It's just like...
Was the story Dee Dee being held at gunpoint until he gets the song right? Like, that was...
Yeah, he's just like waving his gun around all the time. It's like, yeah, of course Phil Spector shot someone. Because he was waving his gun around all the time.
Yeah.
Yeah, he was a fucking psychopath. It was terrible to work with him. And then, of course, he's just like, he's like domineering and like, it's got to be this way. And it's like, these guys play like 20-minute sets. They're just dumb New York kids. Like,
yeah. So with that record, they really do start to experiment with their sound because their records are not selling great. They're selling fine. They sell fine enough that the sire wants to keep them, but they don't have any hits. Like they just don't have any hits. End of the Century has like their biggest hit, and it's like peaks at number 60 or something like that on the singles chart. Like they just cannot get that commercial success. They already got that punk cred. They helped invent punk as a genre, and it the subculture thing. They already had that locked down. And like these guys wanted to make commercially successful music. Like that's what they always wanted. They were so heavily inspired by like 50s and 60s rock that they just wanted to be successful and make some big pop songs, So End of the Century is them attempting to really get that commercial success. And the label is like also trying to get them some commercial success. Like we got to get something out of this. And that record's like a bomb.
I Want to Be Sedated didn't chart.
No, that's a non-charting song. They only have like one charting song, I think. And I think it's off of End of a Century. I'm blanking on that one. I didn't take notes on End of a Century though. So
yeah.
But so Pleasant Dreams, the record, End of a Century does not do well. And so they're like, all right, we're still searching for that radio hit. They're moving away from the punk sound. Johnny claims this is like the label's idea. Johnny's like, the label wants us to be more commercially successful. I'm happy with just writing rock songs. And he was like, they're chasing radio airplay.
Yeah.
And the band had initially wanted producer Steve Lillywhite to work on this album, who at this point had produced albums by U2, The Psychedelic Furs, Susie and the Banshee, XTC, and Peter Gabriel. So like this guy was doing punk and punk adjacent albums.
Yeah. He was doing those next steps of punk.
Yeah. And the label did not want that. The label wanted a celebrity to produce the record, hoping that it would help sell records. So they go with Graham Gouldman of 10cc's, because apparently at that point he was very famous. 10cc's were that popular that Sire was like, we got to get this celebrity producer in here to do this record. It's very weird.
Because they were around from the early 70s and they had tons of hits. They had radio hits.
Yeah.
It doesn't make sense stylistically.
No.
To get the 10cc guy. Like it just...
And he hadn't produced anything else except for 10cc records. And a handful of other like tiny things. Like he was not a known producer. He didn't have much experience producing anything outside of his own music. So it was just a celebrity. It's just like, we got a famous guy. It's just you find I'm trying to think if you did that now. Like, yeah, we just hired,
Well, he wrote a lot of stuff too.
He did write
for
songs.
10cc. He wrote stuff for the Yardbirds, the Hollies, Herman's Hermits, like stuff that was hits.
Yeah.
Yeah, they wanted name recognition, which just doesn't make any sense. Because who's really buying, right? Like who's buying a record because it's produced by the guy from 10cc?
Right.
Like Phil Spector wasn't enough name recognition.
Yeah,
like you already had someone who was known for being a massively influential record producer.
I mean, at this point, I guess the things that sell records is radio play. Like if you have a hit song on the radio, that will sell your album better. So I guess they were like, look, this guy can write songs. Maybe he can help them.
But then he doesn't write any songs for the record.
He didn't write any songs for this record. No, he did not. So yeah, just a very weird kind of choice by the label to work on this album.
She's a sensation. She looks so sweet. She's a sensation. She's a sensation. Good enough to eat. She's a sensation. Oh, she looks so fine. She's a sensation. She's a sensation. I'm gonna make her mine, no matter what you do. I give my heart to you. No matter what they say, yeah, we can find a way. And oh, baby, we can find a way. Oh, I really know.
Now, I have lots of quotes from Johnny, because apparently Johnny talked about this record a lot, and kind of touches on a lot of different things. But I guess as far as Graham Gouldman's concerned, Johnny, even though he was very unhappy with this record, Johnny went into this record not wanting to like it. He decides, like Graham would try and say, hey, play this on the guitar. And Johnny would just go, nah, you play it. And just give him the guitar and like, you play it on the record. So that's why Graham Gouldman has so many he's got a guitar credit on the album. It's because like Johnny just didn't want to learn it and didn't want to play it. But he's like, but he was really easy to work with. He was a gentleman. He said he changed a lot of the songs. But he would say stuff like, here's a nice chord for the bridge. You should be playing a minor chord instead of a major chord. Stuff like that. He said Gouldman had ideas for vocal harmonies, guitar overdubs, and melodic bass lines. And then, yeah, if he suggested a guitar part, it had to sound like it came from Johnny, or he wouldn't play it. So that's why he would write a part, and then he'd be like, here, Johnny, play this. And he's like, doesn't sound like I would play it.
Yeah.
So Johnny sounds like a pain in the ass to work with on this record.
Yeah. Well,
but they're writing a record too that like they're chasing this commercial success, and he does not want that. He is not trying to chase that. He's like, I want a commercial success because of what we do as a band, not because we tried to write a pop song. He's like, I don't want to alienate fans. The fans like us for doing this thing. And so yeah, he had a very particular vision for the band and how he wanted to play the band. And if anything but jutted up against that and he didn't want to do that, he literally just made somebody else do it for him. But Gouldman said he also revealed that there were certain tracks he plays the guitar on. I'd show Johnny and he'd say, you play it. But I had to have a very restrictive, nothing fancy at all. Like, so even the way he would have played it, he still had to like dumb it down for,
strip it down. Yeah.
So he says there wasn't much work to do with the songs. He said, we changed arrangements slightly, but it was basic stuff. Like, let's put an end on this song rather than a fade. Let's double up on the chorus at the end. But then Dee Dee says he's like, Graham really produced, like he put something into the album, some harmony ideas. So Graham is like, I didn't do much. I was just like, hey, let's fade this out. Like just small things.
Yeah.
Now maybe he's just kind of understating, he's being humble and he's like, I didn't do much for this record, that kind of thing. They seem to think he did more than he did.
Well, it's probably somewhere in between. He probably, for what he was used to doing, it probably wasn't much work.
Yeah.
Because it's not much work to say, let's double the chorus. Let's put an end. Yeah. Let's, here's a guitar part. Like the guitar parts he's coming up with, I'm sure he's sitting there like listening to the songs and he just like picks up a guitar and he's like, well, you could do this, just like pulls it out of the air, and then it just makes sense to simplify it. And I feel like anything that he did, it seems like he was probably just doing it on the fly and in the moment, and not something that he like would have like actually labored over. So from his perspective, it's not a lot. And then from their perspective, it's like, oh, he's coming up with vocal harmonies. It's like, well, because he just knows how to do harmonies on the spot. I don't know.
Yeah.
He's probably done a lot of them. he's not having to think that hard about it. But for them, they don't do them.
Yeah. Yeah. So all around, it seems like from a production standpoint, he wasn't bad for it. And musically, let's think of the production of this record. I think it sounds pretty good. Like, I don't think it sounds. I didn't get to do a full sandwich. I didn't get to listen to both albums on either end all the way through. But I did like sample maybe like the first half of each just to kind of get a feel for like what they sounded like at that each time. I think the Phil Spector production is not good for them at all. Like, there's great songs on the record, but the production is terrible for that album.
Yeah.
It doesn't work.
It's wrong. End of a Century it's such a frustrating record because it should be, because they're so inspired by the stuff that he produced, that he's famous for producing. Like, there's no Ramones without the Ronettes, like it absolutely should work. And then you listen to it and it doesn't.
I did read an interview too that Johnny did, because they did like reissues in the 2000s, and so they did reissues of like the 80s records, which hadn't been done in a while, and so like they interviewed Johnny for all of them. And one of the things that he said about what the interviewer said about End of a Century was like, Phil Spector invented the wall of sound, but the Ramones already played the wall of sound, so what's the point in using him, because they already were doing that, so you don't need him anymore. They're already at that point.
Yeah.
Well,
that's the thing is too, like, probably a big reason it doesn't work. It's like Johnny's guitar is so full and grainy and gainy. Like, you can't stack those guitars up. At least not then. No, people would maybe double track, but if you're playing these full like Marshall tones, like, they don't stack very well. You really need to have the variety of amps and the different guitars. That's where you get into like the 90s, where people are like quad tracking everything. They're like changing guitars and changing amps and for all of the different tracks, so that you fill in all these different areas. And if they're just doing what Phil Spector did, was like, just play it exactly the same over top of it. What does that do? That's not doing anything. It's just making it harder to distinguish what the guitars are doing. Yeah, that End of a Century record, like, it's just such a, I don't even know. I feel like it's not as slick, but it is slick. It's really weird. It's really hard to describe what is wrong with the way it sounds, but it just doesn't sound right.
Yeah. This record, the production does sound pretty polished, I would say. It does sound good. And there were a lot of reviews at the time that were talking about how the production on this record takes the punk edge away. Like, it's not as punky and not as edgy and gritty anymore. And I'd agree with the songs. Maybe, like, I'd say that's more on the songwriting, though. Like, I don't think that the less edgy songs on the record are less edgy because of the production. I think they're less edgy because of how they wrote the song. Like, they were writing pop songs instead of punk songs for the most part.
And they have songs like that on every record before it, other than like the first record.
So I think it's just, maybe there's just a higher percentage of that type of song on this record, and maybe that's why it feels like they're going more in that direction.
I mean, I guess like the harder songs on this record, the guitars are probably a little less up front. They're probably mixed. They feel a little more like they're mixed towards the background, and there's definitely more reverb on the drums and vocals really all over the record. So the harder songs do feel a little bit softer. They don't have that in your face gritty punk element that the records before it have. But End of the Century has the same problem.
Yeah. So listening to the record, any of the songs that I was like, this feels like a classic Ramones song. Like, I would get that feeling from All Quiet on the Eastern Front that has that to it. You Sound Like You're Sick has that classic Ramones feel to it. You Didn't Mean Anything to Me, Come On Now, Sitting in My Room. Like, all those songs, I was like, these feel like kind of older, like the older Ramones records, like the first 4 records.
I was looking songs,
and they're all the Dee Dee songs. I was like, oh, Dee Dee's the one who drives that Ramones sound, because this is the first record that they are crediting the songs to the songwriters and not just Ramones wrote the whole song.
Yeah.
Which there are no Johnny writing credits on this album either.
Yeah.
No Johnny writing credits and Dee Dee writing credits. Those would be your Ramones-y classic Ramones songs.
Yeah, it's funny that Johnny doesn't write anything for the record, shows up, doesn't even want to play anything. This is a Dee Dee Joey record.
Yeah, it is. And Joey feels like he's experimenting the most on this record. Like, he's like, I'm going full pop on a lot of these songs. Though, to be fair, and KKK Took My Baby Away is a Joey song, and that is straight up just Ramones, classic Ramones.
Yeah.
So, yeah. So it is weird. Johnny is like, man, I don't want to do a pop record. I'm not even going to play it. I'm not even going to write any songs for the record. Like, it's just this weird. He didn't like that they weren't writing as a band either. He didn't like that everybody was taking individual credits. But the reason that they're doing that is because Joey said on End of the Century, he was writing most of the songs, and he was mad that the whole band was getting the credit for it. So he wanted the credit. He wanted songwriting credits for what was his, instead of just being like, it's Ramones. And he's like, but I'm doing more of the work when it comes to the writing.
I'm doing all the work.
Which, I don't know. I have very mixed feelings on writing credits on albums. I think crediting the whole band, I don't know. It's tough. Because sometimes it is where it's like, just one guy wrote the song. Like the whole thing.
I don't think it's... I mean, we've just seen what happens.
Yeah.
When people fall out and then you have to figure out who gets credit and who gets paid. I don't think it's a good idea to just credit the band unless you are genuinely writing the songs in like what I would call like metalcore band, hardcore band fashion, where it's like, I got a riff, and then I could do this, and then I could go like where you are collectively sitting there and like jamming out a song. Unless you're writing that, if you are writing chords and melodies and bringing that to the band, then you have that's the songwriter, and the songwriter should be credited individually, just because it's just going to save you a hassle. But it does create another band dynamic that you have to like try to be professional about, because certainly bands have broken up and people have been kicked out of bands because of he's getting too many writing credits.
Yeah.
So it's
true.
Ultimately, you should just have one songwriter. And if you have a bunch of songwriters, they need to be extremely professional.
It is a mixed bag. I feel like DIY punk bands just called, everybody gets a punk, the band gets the credit. It's just because it's whatever. But then it becomes like major label stuff. You get points on songwriting. You get points on playing. So like some people are if you're in the same band, some people are literally getting more money from the record because they wrote more songs and they played the songs. So they get a performance pay and they get a writing pay. It's just like a weird.
Yeah.
That's where it gets real messy, is when money gets involved in these.
You have to figure out, you have to delineate like who gets writing credits for like coming up with one small idea that then gets featured. Which, I mean, with the way songwriting copyright lawsuits are going, like, yeah, you can definitely get a copyright or a writing credit or whatever for a beat. So
yeah, it's weird. It's almost like just give everybody a credit and then everybody gets a piece of it.
Yeah. But then you have to do that for literally every session person who plays on the record.
Yeah.
Because it's like, unless they're reading off of sheet music, if they're sitting down and coming up with a part, then they're writing.
So this record, little bit marred with some substance abuse issues. Dee Dee is very much in the thick of his drug addiction at this time period. I mean, he's contributing a lot to the record though. Like, he writes half the album, so it's not hindering him so much. But it might have. I didn't read a ton about what was going on with him in the studio, as far as like how difficult it was to work with. It feels like it would have been difficult. It's probably difficult to work with everyone on this record, but so Dee Dee's part. I don't know. But also, Marky and Joey are both like, we're drinking too much. Like, this is the beginning of them, like, drinking a lot, like, way too much. So that's also playing a factor into, like, a lot of the stress going into the recording of this album. But where End of the Century is like, all right, we're trying to do something different than our first 4 records. And this album is like a continuation of that. This record is probably the most important record for the band's dynamic going forward for the rest of their career. So this is the record that Joey's girlfriend Linda left him for Johnny.
Yeah.
by like it was like close to the end of the recording session, she jumps to Johnny basically. It's always written as like Johnny stole his girlfriend from me. It's like, well, she's a human being with decisions, and she didn't, whatever it was about Joey, she didn't really want to be with him anymore, and saw stuff in Johnny that she did want to be with. And for what it's worth, she stayed with him the rest of, they got married, and like she was with him the rest of, Johnny's life. So
yeah, Linda runs most of the Ramones stuff now. I mean, Joey's brother does too.
Yeah, he does a lot of the other stuff.
What's his name?
Mickey Lee.
Mickey Lee. Yeah. So it's kind of like between him and Linda, which it's funny. It's Johnny and Joey's, proxies.
Yeah. So like, that became a really, this is the end of them being, I don't know if they were even really ever friends before, but this basically,
they probably squabbled over politics, and because Johnny was a Republican, they probably squabbled over politics and like creative stuff before, but then going forward, it's just they have personal. Joey was definitely mad at Johnny.
Joey held a grudge
about Linda leaving him.
Joey held a grudge against him the rest of his life, basically, and it ruined their relationship. Johnny and Joey's relationship was irrevocably broken at this point. They basically stopped talking to each other, yet they stayed a band for another 15 years. It's like you hate each other. Well, I don't even think that Johnny like even necessarily like hated Joey for it, but I guess that animosity just will only grow over time. But how did they stay together as the two remaining permanent members of the Ramones for another 15 years? Is it just a matter of we just don't talk to each other? That's how we make it work. It's like, well, that's not also working either. Like, I don't understand.
We talk to each other only about the business.
Yeah, and my guess it's very little of that too. It's more like if they have business talk, they're all there, and they're like, yeah, like that's all.
Probably a lot. Probably
yes
a
or
lot
no.
Of. Will you tell Johnny that?
Will you tell Johnny to please pass the butter? No, I feel it's probably a lot of the manager talking to each other, to each of them separately.
Yeah.
So they said that Johnny like knew, like at the time, he was like, "This is bad." Like he's like he knew how upset Joey was about the whole thing, and so basically Linda stops coming to shows. She doesn't come to shows anymore. If she does, she's like in the back. They keep her kind of hidden away from Joey. It's just like out of sight. He'll run out and see her, and then he'll go back and do the stuff. Like they just kept her away from Joey the entire time, which that's also got to be weird because there's got to be a point where you're just like, Joey, you have to get past this. Please get past this. For your own sake, get past this.
Yeah. It's a really weird thing. Like, it certainly is understandable. I think it's very understandable that Joey would be upset.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I think the idea, we joke, like we said, like, Linda's a person, she made her own decisions. And, like, it's not like Johnny went and kicked sand in Joey's face and, he carried away his girlfriend. Like, it's not like that, but it is weird and awkward if your friend dates your ex. Like, most people feel that's weird and awkward and uncomfortable. Like, it just is certainly understandable and relatable that Joey would be upset. At a certain point, he needs to let it go, but also Joey does have OCD. Like,
yeah,
that is probably not something that's letting things go is not something that people with OCD are known for being able to do easily. So it can be a little prolonged. I can see that. But I think to some extent the band going to those extra lengths to keep Linda out of Joey's sight probably enables Joey to hold on to that grudge. And that's not good. And he should have been forced to confront it and work on it and get over it.
Like, by the time that they get married, he should probably have been like, all right, maybe kind of a meant to be situation, like,
yeah,
Johnny probably should not have dated Joey's ex-girlfriend, like it's not good for friendship. It's not good for interband dynamics. And Linda also maybe should have not immediately jumped to Johnny and
yeah,
because that's not good for your husband's, work politics and experiences there. So it's just like, I mean, who's to say though? She stayed with him, so like, you can't be like she should have moved on, but like clearly they loved each other and it worked.
The heart wants what it wants,
as far as
I
guess.
know,
But
yeah, and I mean it's a messy situation and it's weird and it's like there's not like a strict set of rules that everyone must follow. Like it's especially like when you're dealing with people with addictions and in a industry that doesn't really have ethical standards at all. Fleetwood Mac records are praised for being about people cheating on each other. So
yeah, with each other. They're with each other in the band, then they each cheated on people with other people in the band. So
and they pointedly sing songs at each other on their own records about their relationships.
Yeah.
So it's it's really ultimately everyone is to blame to some extent. But I do think, unfortunately, the long term, Joey comes out looking the worst in this, that he held that grudge for the rest of your life. It's like, come on, you got to get over your ex-girlfriend.
Yeah.
You got to get over that. I know it's harder for you, but you got to eventually.
Because you're working with the guy who she's dating after that you knew before. You knew him before her. So it's another just like a weird, like, man, just messed up. Like Johnny probably shouldn't have pursued it. Linda shouldn't have pursued it, because there's a part in it, and there's a quote from Johnny. He says, had Linda not left Joey for him, he wouldn't have even been talking about her and saying how much he loved her, because he wouldn't have been obsessed about it. So like, because it was him, it drove him even crazier than if it was just like a normal relationship ended. He probably would have gotten over it more normally, like after that. Yeah.
She would have been out of sight, out of mind. If she had gone to someone else outside that he doesn't know, like, it's easy to cut ties. Like, he's just never going to see her,
Right. And now she's like tethered to the
never
band.
Hear about her or never think about like, oh, I see the guy that is with her every day.
Yeah. Yeah. It messes with you, I guess. But
yeah,
it's just wild. This is the breaking point of their like dynamic as a band. Though, to be fair, probably would have happened later anyway. Like, it feels like it just would have eventually happened with their dynamics and personalities and everything. So
there would have been something else that was the reason that they
broke our friendship and band, relationship. Yeah, it's just odd that they're the only two that like are there the whole time, never leaving. They're so committed to their Ramones that it's just a job for them, I guess, after a certain point,
Yeah.
So, okay, that's kind of all like the backstory-ish stuff. The album, what does it do? It peaks at number 58 on the Billboard 200. Not too bad, but no hits off this record. They also didn't release any singles in the U.S. from this album. Sire, what are you doing? If you want a hit, you got to put some songs out. All the singles went out in Europe. Like, you didn't even try with this one.
It doesn't. And the singles they pick, We Want the Airwaves.
Yeah.
Probably could have done something on American rock radio.
Yeah. Because it had a little bit of a similar thing going on with, do you remember Rock and Roll Radio?
Yeah.
Conceptually. And that song, I think, was one. No, Rockaway Beach was the one that charted. That was the charting song. But, yeah. It could have done something.
She's a Sensation.
Yeah.
Super catchy.
Yeah. Really catchy song.
It fits their retro, bubblegum pastiche thing, too.
Which, at this time, we just talked about Joan Jett.
Right.
Retro pastiche is working in the mainstream. It's successful. Punk's
doing covers of British Invasion and girl group songs. Yeah, that does well. I mean, the Go-Go's.
Yeah, it's very much
are a surf girl group band for the 80s.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, Sire botched it. Sire is the reason that there's no major Ramones hits. Like, I mean, I don't know. Maybe if Bruce Springsteen had actually given them Hungry Heart.
Yeah, I mean, it worked for Patty.
And if Johnny had actually let them use it.
He didn't want it.
I don't know. Well, it was Bruce wrote it. He was going to give it to the Ramones. His manager was like, don't do that. You just gave away 2 songs that became hits for other people. Because he gave Because the Night to Patti Smith for 1 hit. He gave Fire to the Pointer Sisters It was a hit for them. So he's like, I'm going to give away this song to the Ramones. And he's like, the fuck you are. No, we're putting that out. That's yours. That's going to be your hit. And it was like his first like major like actual
so he had
single hit. I mean, Born to Run was, a big deal as an album, but he didn't have like a really successfully high charting. I think Hungry Heart hit like 5 probably, which he never hit a number 1 hit, but that was just because of Prince.
I don't think it would have hit 5 with the Ramones though.
It would have gone high though. I think it probably would have gone high.
It probably could have been their highest charting single. Well, also because it would have been like known. Oh, this is the Springsteen song that he wrote for the Ramones. Like, because that's what helped helped the Patti Smith first song, because it was like, oh, but Bruce Springsteen wrote a song for Patti Smith. That's cool. Yeah. Let's hear it, and then it becomes a hit. So, yeah, being a Bruce song, it probably would have made it a hit for them. It probably would have been their highest hit.
Yeah, it would have had. It just would have given them that extra attention, which is. Yeah, so that's what Sire was looking for with why they picked the producer that they were wanting. They just got somebody who didn't actually have name recognition.
I think about, like, what would the Steve Lillywhite version of this record have sounded like? Because the type of bands that he was working with at the time are not the Ramones. Like, he's doing, like, post-punk records. Like, he's doing goth records. He's doing the U2 record. Like, would he have pushed them in a different direction that they never went on their own? Like, are we getting a post-punk Ramones album? Like lots of reverby, like plucked guitar parts instead of the all downstroke Johnny guitars. I don't know.
See, the things that Lillywhite would have wanted to do, Johnny would have also not wanted to do. But I guess there's like the possibility that you get like a psychedelic furs sax kind of thing. You get a little more of the grit potentially. That's probably stays and comes through. So, I mean, Talk, that was 81 too. That's pretty slick record. It has Pretty in Pink.
Yeah, it probably would have sounded more like the Furs album than like the U2 or the...
It's not going to sound like it's not going to sound like XTC because you need somebody playing XTC guitars.
Yeah. It might have hit some of the harsher elements of like Juju maybe. But all those records, what they have in common is lots of reverb. So it might have been even like there's reverb on this album, but like I think Steve Lillywhite would have made it even more reverby.
Yeah, I'm not sure what the production changes would have been because you think about those bands, XTC, Susie, Psychedelic Furs, they all have such unique personalities and sounds that go across all of their records.
Yeah,
Susie had, certainly she had her voice, but which is not not dissimilar to Joey's voice. But the songwriting is much more minor and gothy with Susie, and it's not with the Ramones.
I wonder if Johnny would have written for him though.
Yeah,
I don't know. I don't think that it would have got I don't think it would have helped them with the commercial thing they were going for. I don't think Lillywhite's production is going to make them more. Maybe in the UK, but not in the States. Doesn't feel like his production, because even U2 at this point weren't big in the US yet. The Furs, I think it takes a minute, right? Like it takes a couple records.
Because Pretty in Pink isn't a hit prior to the movie,
right?
Which is like much 86.
Later. Yeah. So Lillywhite probably doesn't help. So I guess they were like, between two producers, maybe we'll get a celebrity bump. So I get it. That being said, this is a really good album, right?
Yeah. Like we've talked so much about the story and the production and the label fuck up, but it's a really good record. Like it's funny because people say the first 4, and as much as I have issues with End of the Century, it's a really good record.
Mm-hmm.
The songs are good. Great.
Yeah.
There's enough great material there. Pleasant Dreams, Subterranean Jungle, Too Tough to Die. Like, I don't fully... Well, it's the production, and there's just, like, the momentum of the first 4 Ramones record, where I see that there's a little slowdown 2 years before End of the Century. But it's so easy to just say the next 4 too.
Yeah.
Because they're all good. They're good. They're above average records, despite their flaws. And the thing is, there are flaws on the first 4 Ramones record. First record's kind of rough. A lot of the songs are really samey.
Yeah.
Road to Ruin is probably the weakest of the first 4. I don't know. It might be tied with the first. Pleasant Dreams is a very easy to listen to record.
Oh yeah.
Nothing turns me off on it. There's no songs that I hate. There's enough songs that are not as easy to recall later, not as memorable ultimately, but there's tons of super memorable material on here. You want the Airwaves, All Quiet on the Eastern Front, KKK Took My Baby Away.
That's an all-timer.
A minor Ramones hit. It's a for the rest of their career song that they play live. Like,
Yeah.
when I guess when I say this record they have hits, I guess I'm thinking like live hits. It's the songs that always went over well live, so they kept playing them.
Yeah.
The fan favorites. This record's got plenty of them. KKK, She's a Sensation. Like,
You know what I love on this record has songs that I'm like, I love this song, and I didn't really think like I've listened to this record before, but like I didn't think about like each of the tracks individually like as much as when I'd listened to it for the show. And I love It's Not My Place in the 9 to 5 world.
yeah.
It is such a different sounding song for this record too. It's like I read something that says it's a very Kinks style song.
Yeah.
There's a part in the song where I'm like, that's the Ventures 5 o'clock world right there. Like there's not
the Ventures. The other V band.
Yeah, it's the other V band.
The Vogues.
The Vogues, yeah. It's like that is that song. Like it's like a bridge after the chorus or something that's just like, oh, you just straight up like took that part. It's very similar. But it's got an amazing chorus to it. Like the chorus on this song is phenomenal. I love this song. One of my favorites on the record. Sitting in my room, just like, and that guitar riff, very British sounding, like Damned style guitar riff on that song. Love that one. 7-Eleven is fun. It's a really fun song that's like doing what do they call those songs? Like the Shangri-La's Leader of the Pack, like, because the end of the song, the girlfriend dies, because of a car accident. Like, it's that kind of song.
Yeah. I mean, it's just like they're
not called murder ballads. Those are different. Like, they have a name, like death songs or something like that,
I mean, it just feels like a pop girl group song. It's those kind of.
But they said it in like the 80s. Like, they're at the 7-Eleven at this, playing Space Invaders on the arcade, the video arcade machine. Teenage tragedy songs. That's what those are called. You Sound Like You're Sick is a really fun song. She's a Sensation's an all-timer. It's just like a classic song from the record. This whole record's good. And Joey has a wide kind of range of like vocal deliveries on this album too. Like he does a lot with the melodies and stuff that he put into this record.
Joey is one of those miraculous vocalists. Like a wide baritone. Just a big range, super unique voice. It just sounds like Joey. Like there's no one else who sounds like him unless they're doing a Joey Ramone imitation. Like his accent comes through his singing.
Mm-hmm.
He's technical in a way that someone who is like self-taught as he is shouldn't be. Just super smooth transition, from low to high in his vocals range. And it's like, yeah, it's a lot of power. He can get gravelly. Just an incredible voice. It really is. And he just has it. Like, it's just one of those voices, like he just woke up with it. He doesn't, and maybe he worked on it. Maybe he took lessons. I don't know, but he doesn't seem like it.
Yeah. He sounds great on this record. Like,
and I think he sounds great the whole time. His whole career, he sounds great. His last records, the last Ramones records, there was, certainly like his health wasn't great at the very end. So there was a lot of stuff he just couldn't sing. That's why there's so many, there's like CJ songs and so many of them on the last record. It was CJ, right? Yeah.
Yeah, CJ took over for Dee Dee. Well, one of Dee Dee's replacements. Because who's Marky's replacement? Is it Richie?
Yeah.
Because they kick Marky out for his drinking problem.
Yeah, and I think he sounds great on. I think that the production is different, but it's not as bad as End of the Century's is. And I guess End of the Century has that expectation versus reality that maybe skews the perception of the production, but this one works. It's certainly polished, but works. It works for the songs. It allows for more variety, which at this point in their career, they honestly need.
Yeah.
They don't, and that's the thing. That's the thing that I don't understand about the first 4 albums only. You know, that long repeated, like, and the critical reception of the records that they put out in the 80s, you know, at the time of it being, oh, it's too slick, oh, they lost their edge, and like they couldn't be the CBGB punk band forever.
Yeah.
Joey wasn't writing those songs. Joey was writing Kinks songs and Ronettes songs. Like, he's doing other things, and Johnny's not writing anything. And eventually Dee Dee's not writing anything. You know,
Yeah.
Eventually Dee Dee leaves. There was just only ever going to be so much gas in the tank for that sound. And I don't think that they should have stopped. I guess the idea is, well, they should have stopped if they didn't. If they couldn't continue to do that sound, they should have stopped rather than change as a band. I think that's bullshit. I think they should have changed as a band. I think they changed as people, not necessarily for the best, but they certainly aged.
But if you look at the rest of the CBGB bands that played with them all the time, they all changed. None of them stayed the same thing they were in the very beginning, or they broke up. You know, it was like a case of like they broke up within 2 years, you know, like Richard Hell, you know, over, you know, that kind of stuff. But like Blondie and Talking Heads and B-52s, like, and Cramps, like they all changed. Even the Cramps, who were pretty much like sonically consistent throughout their career, they make big changes after like the 3rd or 4th album. More like top songwriting topics, and they didn't have a bass player. Remember, they were right. They added a bass player, so like that. Even that is them changing to.
It wasn't just Poison Ivy recording the bass parts.
Yeah,
yeah. And also the scene they came from was arty and weird.
Yeah.
Honestly, it's kind of remarkable that they played CBGB so many times, considering what the scene was, for them to be playing ultimately dumb rock in a scene with a bunch of Rhode Island art freaks and Blondie
it's
doing
funny
disco,
because they all seem to really respect their Ramones. Like, none of them, I've never heard any of them say anything about their Ramones. They have problems with each other. Like Patti Smith and Blondie like hate each other. I think even like Tina Weymouth and Patti Smith have issues with each other too. Like, I don't think Blondie and Talking Heads have issues with each other. They seem fine, but
the Talking Heads have issues with themselves.
Yeah, right. Like,
Patty never had a problem with Tom Verlaine.
Yeah,
they stayed friendly.
Yeah, so nobody ever really seemed to. But also, the Ramones were the first to get out of that scene. They were the first to, you know, sign with Sire and move on to something else. So nobody really has it. And they were also kind of like this like force of nature too. They just like come in, whirlwind, short set, leave. You know.
Yeah.
I don't know how much they were hanging out with the individual members, but there's a track on the deluxe version of this record. It came off of like a soundtrack of some sort. I don't remember what movie it's from. And the backing vocals on that track are Debbie Harry, Kate Pearson, and Cindy Wilson. I was just like, I didn't actually listen to it. I should listen to it just to see what that song sounds like. But it's fun to see like the CBGB voices still like hanging out with the Ramones. Yeah, I think this is I think it's underrated.
Well, Debbie and Joey stayed friends.
Yeah.
For the rest of his life.
I think this is probably one of the more underrated records in their discography. Like, I think even in this pocket we're in, like the extra, like the next 4 run, it's probably not really talked about that often, because it seems like maybe Subterranean Jungle is probably like the truly most underrated out of those. It feels like people actively dislike that one, and it doesn't have a story really to go with it. Like, it's just one of those and another one. But I think people like Too Tough to Die more. Like, that's like considered like their last high point as a band. But I do think Pleasant Dreams is underrated as far as like, it's a really good record that should be talked about more. But I guess, you know, there's that first 4 records thing where everybody's, you know, always wants to talk about the first things a band did, which we do that too. You know, we're not immune from it. There are definitely bands we talk about where we only like the first couple records, but
yeah, I mean, it happens, you know. It's not to say that bands don't ever change for the worse. They do.
Yeah. A lot of them do.
Plenty of them do. I just don't. I have felt for a long time that the assessment of their. I mean, honestly, the assessment of Black Sabbath, only the first 4 is bullshit too, because the next 4 records are good too.
Yeah.
The Aussie period of Black Sabbath in general is enjoyable. It just gets more commercially metal later, and it doesn't have that unique Sabbath quality. That's what it is. I guess it's you lose if you shed some of that. I don't know. There's some percentage of intrinsic quality that if you lose, people are going to go, they lost it. It's just. I don't even think the Ramones really shed that much of it, though.
No, I guess the thing with the Ramones is even though they do change quite a bit with End of Century and this record, they don't change enough to the point where I think their sound, I won't say sounds dated, but it feels a little bit more in the past than a lot of their contemporaries were doing at this time, and what just like the greater music scene is doing at the time. Because when you think about this record in the comparison of what else is happening in like punk music specifically, like we're getting ready to enter like a really creative period of punk music. Like Damaged has come out, the Punchline has come out. Like we're about to get like all SST in here. Like so much different stuff is coming, you know? So yeah, I feel like they don't stagnate, but they also don't change who they are. It's one of those cases of just like they don't evolve so much outside of their sound that they stop sounding like the Ramones. Like there's no like random ass weird X record in the Ramones discography, you know? Like
yeah, I mean there's your 2 most unique qualities, Johnny and Joey, are there for the entire career, which is probably why I think there's good stuff on all of their records. Mm-hmm. There's a worse period of Ramones. I think people are coming around on this period of Ramones a little more with time. I think people are actually giving these records a listen a little more with an open mind and not just repeating what they've been told. That we've seen this so much. We just talked about 7 Seconds period of their career that people have just been saying forever. It's, they sold out. It's like, are you listening to the records? Because they're good.
And it was funny because like when we did that 7 Seconds record, every single comment we got from anyone was like, I like this stuff a lot. Yeah. Like people really do. People came around on that era of that band. So I guess it's because we are far enough away from that initial like, can't believe they changed, like that feeling of betrayal that these people had. It's so far in the past that like now people like us who are like, when we're getting into the Ramones, they've put all their albums out. There's no more new Ramones records.
They've been broken up for a long time.
Yeah. And some of them dead, so like we get the whole.
When did Johnny die?
Johnny died in 2004.
Yeah. So the 2 important Ramones members are dead by the time we got into the Ramones.
Yeah. Because Joey dies in 2001. Dee Dee dies in 2002, like 2 weeks after they go into the Hall of Fame. And then Johnny dies in 2004. Johnny had cancer too. And then Tommy died in 2014. So yeah, another 10 years. But all the replacement Ramones are still alive though.
Yeah.
And making careers off of being Ramones. Like very much just
touring as Ramones.
It's funny, they can't all tour together because none of them play. Some of them play the same things, so they can't do that. I mean, but I think it would be funny to be like, and we're the replacement Ramones, and they have like, I don't know who sings,
CJ.
Yeah, because CJ sang. It's just you now have 2 drummers.
When CJ tours now, does he play Ramones songs that he didn't sing on, or does he only play the Ramones songs that he sang?
I don't know. I mean, he has records.
He has his own records.
Yeah, he actually has a lot of music.
Oh, he does. He does play.
Does he play his songs or does he play?
He plays Ramones songs. He plays Blitzkrieg Bop, Teenage Lobotomy, Judy is a Punk, Glad to See You Go, Gimme Shock Treatment, Rockaway. He plays Ramones cover sets.
So he's a Ramone cover band.
Except he actually played with them. Like
what the fuck?
That's wild.
CJ is married to Marky Ramone's niece, Chessa Ow, and he has 2 children with her. Or he was. Now he's married to a lawyer, Denise Barton. That is weird. CJ marrying Marky's niece. Because were they in the band at the same time? When does Marky come back? Because Marky leaves and comes back. Yeah, Marquis leaves in 83, comes back in 87. CJ joins in 89. So Richie's 83 to 87. And Richie does music. Elvis, what does he do? Klimberg? He's also from Blondie. So that doesn't really... He's got his own thing. I forgot that that's Klimberg. That is funny. He only drummed from in 87, too. So you have 3 drummers. But I mean, Marky probably plays guitars on his records and with the Intruders or whatever they're called. Yeah, that's funny. Well, anything else you want to say about the record?
No, I don't know. I think it's cool. I think it's a really good record. I think it has a really interesting album cover too.
Yeah.
It's
They hated the album cover. Apparently.
Yeah.
They had another cover. There's an alternate cover. I don't know what it looks like though. What they initially pitched. I wonder if it's the same cover as the New York mix, because it came out last year. A Record Store Day record called New York Mix of Pleasant Dreams came out.
Oh yeah. But
I don't know if that's the cover though. You know, he said it's when he was talking about those reissues. He's like, I think it's in there somewhere. So in the maybe you need to look at the packaging for the Pleasant Dreams deluxe reissue.
Album cover was by Guy Juke. Never looked at any of his art. I mean, it's more in that style.
Let's give it a rating. What are you thinking?
I think it's like a 4.5. I love this record. I can easily reach for this one as often as the first 4.
Yeah, I give it 4.5 seems fair. Yeah, 4.5, maybe 4.25, but nah, I think 4.5 is really good. I think 4.5 is good. It's pretty dynamic too. There's enough dynamics to keep it different because they had to. You can't do the same thing every single record. But yeah. Well, I think that will do it for us then. So thank you all so much for listening. And you can follow us on all forms of social media, Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, @PunkLottoPod. Voicemail line 202-688-PUNK. And our email address is punklottopod@gmail.com. But I think that will do it for us. So thank you all so much. And we will talk to you next time.
To order Punk, call the number on your screen. Rush delivery is available. Remember, this special offer is not sold in stores.